The prairie stretched wide beneath a violet dusk, the horizon awash in colors that seemed too soft for a land so harsh. Dust lifted from the earth with each weary step of Elias Boone's horse, curling in the fading light like smoke from a dying fire. He was a tall man, broad in shoulder, but bent now at the edges from 45 years of sun, toil, and loneliness. His hat-brim shadowed eyes that had long forgotten the shape of joy. Some men carried their years with pride, but Elias bore his like a sentence. He told himself often, almost daily, that love was a pasture closed to him now. He had said the words so many times, they felt carved into his bones, too old for love. Yet the wind carried strange things across the plains, and tonight it carried a presence that unsettled the quiet rhythm of his resignation. By the old corral, its posts rotting, its rails leaning like tired men, sat a young woman, her figure small against the broad sky. She rested on the weathered wood, as if she had been waiting all day, her belongings bound in cloth at her side. Her long braid glinted dark as obsidian in the failing light, and her dress, though simple, was patterned with the kind of beadwork that spoke of patience and tradition. Elias reined his horse, frowning. What business had she here, alone, on ground even coyotes avoided after sundown? He cleared his throat, his voice low from disuse. "Ma'am, you got someone comin' for you?" She looked up slowly, her eyes catching the last of the sun. They were steady, not frightened. "No one's coming," she said. Her voice was soft but carried, like a note struck clear on a wind chime. Something in it made Elias linger when he should have moved on. A man alone had no place tangling himself with the troubles of a stranger. He thought to ride away, yet his reins tightened instead of loosening. Why, he wondered, did her gaze feel less like an introduction and more like recognition? Later, in his cabin, he found himself watching her by the dim lantern glow, though he had sworn he would not invite her in. But the open plains offered wolves, and the town behind offered worse. So he gave her a seat at his table, set out bread and water. His own hands, calloused from years of ranch work, trembled as he passed the cup. He had not known they still could. She took it gently, thanked him with a nod that seemed to carry more gratitude than words could hold. He spoke before he meant to, confessing in a voice rough with shame that he was too old to start again. That whatever kindness he offered, it came from a man long past the days of hope. His words hung heavy, daring her to confirm what he already believed. But Iona Redbird did not argue. Instead, she placed her hand over his, steady, warm, unhurried. She said nothing. In that silence was no judgment, no pity, only the kind of patience that waits for a wounded animal to trust the outstretched palm. He felt his breath falter. For years he had longed for comfort and dreaded it in equal measure. Now it sat across from him, neither demanding nor retreating. He pulled his hand back abruptly, ashamed of how much he wanted to leave it there. Why did her quiet presence feel more dangerous than any outlaw's pistol? The next day, whispers spread in town like wildfire through dry grass. Elias Boone, the grizzled cowboy who had sworn off companionship, was seen escorting a much younger woman, and not just younger, but a native woman at that. The market street rattled with wagons, children darted between stalls, but the true movement was in the eyes that followed them. Too old for her. Too desperate. She'll ruin him. Elias lowered his gaze, the words burrowing under his skin. He had endured loneliness, but shame was sharper, and it cut deep. Yet beside him, Iona walked as though no weight could touch her shoulders. Her braids swayed against her back, her chin lifted. Where he shrank from the stares, she met them. Something fierce sparked in her dark eyes, and Elias felt a stirring he had thought buried forever. Could he borrow her strength to quiet his shame? Could courage be shared like bread? That evening, as the lantern hissed and shadows leaned across the cabin walls, Elias sat cleaning his rifle out of habit. He tried not to watch her by the fire. Iona hummed a tune low and mournful, a melody older than the townsfolk who scorned her. It wrapped around the room, threading through the cracks in his chest until he set the rifle aside. He reached instead for his mother's quilt, folded in the trunk, the one relic of family he had never allowed another to touch. He draped it gently across her shoulders. She stopped humming, her eyes rising to his. No vows, no confessions, only the offering of something sacred. Her fingers traced the fabric, reverent as if she understood the gift. Was this how bonds were forged, not by words, but by the exchange of quiet gestures? The storm came 3 nights later, wind howling like wolves, rain clawing the cabin roof. Elias stood at the window, watching lightning tear the horizon. He had spent so long convincing himself he was too old, that love had passed him like a train he could never board. The words pressed at his throat until he spoke them aloud, louder than the storm itself. "I'm too old for love," he said, his voice cracking with the confession. It was less a statement than a surrender, as if by speaking it he could free her to leave. Ayanna rose from her chair. She crossed the creaking floor, placed her forehead against his chest, and whispered words that broke him open. "I've waited my whole life for you." The storm raged, but within him, silence bloomed. Years of loneliness collapsed like a barn in the wind, leaving only the fierce, tender truth she offered. He wrapped his arms around her, not as a man ashamed of his years, but as one reborn by the faith of another's waiting. Days later, beneath a prairie sky scrubbed clean by rain, they wed. No crowd, no church bells, only a preacher, the endless land, and 2 steady pairs of eyes. Elias's hand shook as he held hers, but it was not from fear. For the first time in decades, he believed in beginnings. The whispers of townsfolk might linger, the years might still weigh heavy, but love had come to him not in youth, not in perfection, but in patience and truth. Years passed, and the cabin filled with warmth, bread rising in the oven, laughter echoing against timber walls, 2 rocking chairs side by side before the fire. Elias Boone, once convinced his heart was a barren field, found it alive with roots that only deepened with time. He would sit in the quiet evenings, watching the flames, her hand folded in his, and think of how love had found him when he had stopped seeking. And now, as I tell you this tale, I ask you to listen with more than your ears. Do not measure love by the years on your back or by the whispers of others. Do not tell yourself it is too late. Love arrives when it chooses, sometimes softly, sometimes like a storm, and it will stay if you dare open your door. Remember this, for one day you may see a figure waiting by a broken fence, and you will wonder if the waiting was meant for you. If this story stirred your heart, ride along with us, subscribe today. And tell me, from which city do you watch these tales unfold? Every story breathes deeper when it's shared with souls like yours.